and welcome to the Collegium, our monthly magazine program in 3 parts: cinema, state of affairs, and our arts calendar. Hello and welcome to the Collegium, our monthly magazine program in 3 parts: cinema, state of affairs, and our arts calendar. For our State of Affairs and Cinema portion of the program, we bring you LA Berlin 2003, LA Berlin 2004 and 5, with the Los Angeles Delegation to Berlin, Germany, in an interview. For our arts calendar, we're very pleased to bring you the Tango Guitar Trio with Pablo García, René Toriello, and José Vítores, Polenta Arrabalera. So in addition to staying cool, remember you are participating in the Collegium. Hello and welcome to our State of Affairs portion of the program, where once again we're very pleased to welcome on the Collegium the Los Angeles Delegation to Berlin, Germany. I'd like you to meet the people, Miss Margie Reese, Miss Sarah Welsh, and Mr. James Burks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Collegium.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we could start with you and you could tell our audience a little bit about your background and why you are here in Berlin.
Well, I'm Margie Reese, General Manager of the City of Los Angeles Cultural Affairs Department. And our office is responsible for supporting all the arts and cultural activities in Los Angeles, as well as the preservation of historic cultural monuments. And so we're in Los Angeles we're in Berlin on a discovery mission, looking for partnerships as a way to enhance the soon-to-be 40-year sister city relationship between Los Angeles and Berlin.
And could you tell us a little bit about how that sister city relationship began?
You know, the Sister City program began in the United States under President Eisenhower as a way to begin to build relationships between world communities and major cities, to forge peaceful relationships, to look at ways that cities can help each other grow. And so the Berlin relationship with Los Angeles began in 1967 when members of the staff of the City of LA and the staff of the City of Berlin got together to look at similarities between the two communities, the size of the two, the population, the economic workforce, etc. And so a relationship began, and Mayor Tom Bradley continued that relationship throughout his life, making sure that the bridge between the two cities began to get narrower and narrower.
Thank you. To the next lady there, could you please tell us a little bit about your background,
Sure.
please?
My name is Sarah Welsh. I'm also with the City of Los Angeles Cultural Affairs Department. I'm in the Marketing and Development Division, and we oversee all the marketing and promotion for all the different events that our department sponsors, such as festivals, exhibitions, and special events. And one of the special programs that we have under our division is the Los Angeles International Cultural Exchange Program, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more. But it's a new program under our division that we're very excited to promote.
And last but not least, this gentleman here, the gentleman I've had the pleasure to work with on a couple of different continents. Thank you very much. Mr. James Burks.
Yeah, thank you, Donald. I'm James Burks. I'm also with the City of Los Angeles Cultural Affairs Department. I'm wearing several hats today, I guess. I'm also here as part of the African Marketplace Corporation, an organization that I started about 18 years ago to look at some things on a sort of smaller scope that the city is looking at in a much larger picture, creating relationships with the African diaspora community worldwide. And I've done several things in that regard through the William Grant Still Arts Center, which is one of the divisions of the City of Los Angeles Cultural Affairs Department, where we've created the African Marketplace and Cultural Fair. Some international programs, the Global Cinema and Global Cinema Urban Music Symposium, and several things that we're doing with aggregation international film festivals. And this is happened to be a stop because Margie, who is my boss and who I work with the Cultural Affairs Department, mentioned that she was coming to Berlin. And this past week, I was in the city of Amman, Jordan, initiating the same process of an international sister city and cultural exchange project. So I'm happy to be back in Berlin. This is my third or fourth trip to Berlin, and I'm glad to know that we're going to increase our relationships and our involvement with Berlin, and also through the Fountainhead Tanz Theater Company.
Thank you. It is apparent that there has been a successful model developed in Los Angeles. It's still growing. How transferable is that model to, say, a city such as Berlin, Germany?
The model is easily transferred.
Okay.
Culture transcends systems because people create systems. And in our communities in Los Angeles, there are so many ways to address culture because each one of our communities has its own way of expressing itself. And so what can be done in LA can be done in any city that allows the voice of a community to be the guide for creating a system for supporting cultural activity.
when we talk about marketing, what is the relationship between what it is that you wish to present to the world through your marketing skills and the economic situation, which is, shall we say, in need of some support on both sides of the Atlantic?
Well, we're looking to both import and export the culture of Los Angeles to the city of Berlin, but also bring the art and culture of Berlin to the city of Los Angeles. So we're looking to do that through a variety of different types of programs. But that's the type of exchange we see happening and what we're here to promote.
In terms of the African marketplace, what would what were the ingredients that have been necessary to make the African marketplace function these 18 years? What has had to go into that to make it last, to sustain it rather, and to hang on all these years and to make it grow?
It's not an easy question. Some of it is a combination of things. One, recognizing the society that we live in, who the values that society places on entities or products or services. But more importantly, and most importantly, I would say, I think it was the diversity, recognizing that diversity exists in all walks of life and to pay respect to diversity as opposed to some of the issues that are happening in the world today where we look at diversity as a potential enemy or an adversary. One of the things that we tried to look at was the influence of Africans worldwide. Consequently, we were looking at other cultures as they exist, not in terms of trying to change them, but looking at those cultures in terms of the respect of the African influence, whether it's hip-hop music, which is now worldwide and one of the major influences in today's modern society, or we're talking about fine art or wearable art or clothing or culinary arts and the foods that people have. If we were here in Germany, we'd be looking at the German diaspora and the influence of Germany around the world, both in Africa, North America, the Caribbean, the Middle East, So I think over the years we've managed to put it into a nice little box and look at it and create relationships locally between the various different communities that make up the African diaspora in Los Angeles. And I'm pleased that you brought us here today.
When we talk about culture, we have culture that is propagated, if you will, by various ethnic groups. And sometimes these ethnic groups do not necessarily have convergent interests, particularly when it comes to the issue of economics. How have you in the city of Los Angeles been able to find a basis for cooperation between various ethnic groups and their varying interests?
The bottom line is that people want to live in communities where they can be successful, and they want to live in communities where their children can be successful. I don't know how more basic you can get when you bring people together from around the world who have different traditions and different customs, but when they come to a place, they want to know that when the sun rises in the morning, they have just as much opportunity to move themselves forward as anyone else. And that requires cooperation. It requires joint educational, systems. It requires conversation. It requires sharing the burden as well as the success. So I don't think it's that difficult. I think when you get to the real base of human nature, people want to be comfortable and happy, and they want to be respected and appreciated for the ideals and customs and stories that they bring with them. So our job is not to change those stories and that history, but to celebrate it, to acknowledge it, and make sure that it's a part of the dialogue.
We have an interesting situation in the United States and also with Great Britain about some world events, and there are questions and issues about how these events were presented to the world, marketed, if you were. How do you handle that issue to tell people the story through the marketing, and how do you distinguish between the way your approach and what is commonly referred to as spin?
Do you want to answer that, James?
I don't know if the United States has a handle on that, and I don't know whether the United States does it as well as some other countries can do it. But as you probably know, Donald, some of the things that I'm trying to do with the Global Cinema and Urban Music Symposium was try to diversify that telling of that story, so that other stories are equally as supported, respected as, say, one spin from the United States saying this is how cultures are. Fortunately, in Los Angeles, you have a community that has 106 languages sometimes spoken in our LA Unified School District. So you better be different. You better be diversified. You better understand other cultures. You better respect those other cultures. Unfortunately, in the media, sometimes there may be one dominant focus. For us in the Cultural Affairs Department, we decided that you can tell the story through diversity and respect of the various differences in our city.
Well, speaking of diversity, we're going to go to break for a moment here, but we'll be right back. So stay with us, and remember, you are participating in the Collegium. Hello and welcome back to the Collegium and our State of Affairs portion of the program, where we're very pleased to have with us Mrs. Margie Reese, Miss Sarah Welsh, and Mr. James Burks. In a time, in an economic climate, once again, where there are some problems, some hiccups, shall we say, it quite often seems that culture, however one wishes to define that term, is the last on the list of priorities when it comes to disbursement. How in LA do you handle the situation with the vagaries of the economic system at the moment, or in the future, or in the past?
Well, you're absolutely right. Funding for the arts worldwide seems to quite often be the second seat to any budget planning process, which is really why it's critical that organizations learn how to diversify their funding base, why they learn how to use economics as a tool instead of as an excuse. So in Los Angeles, we look for partnerships. We look for ways to teach organizations to increase their earned income opportunities. I think the current African marketplace is a prime example of how you use the arts to fund itself. So the African marketplace as a nonprofit organization or as an event brings to the table business people to help with fundraising and planning. I mean, I guess that the notion here is that art for art's sake is no longer the mantle anymore. It's arts as a business. And if you're going to promote cultural activity, you must look at that exercise as a business exercise.
Yeah, because one of the things that's important for us in the Cultural Affairs Department is to translate that information to those who are in the arts field. Sometimes artists or arts organizations tend to think they're waiting for that grant to come through. In reality, what we do is just as important as the corporation down the street whose primary job is the construction of buildings. That adding to the quality of life is very important. Consequently, the Cultural Affairs Department doesn't necessarily issue grants as much as it does contracts for services. With the African marketplace, we recognized right away that the integrity of the arts was important, but we also felt that the contribution by the artists in the community, the contribution of the diversity of the populations in Los Angeles meant that here's an opportunity to expand and contribute to the economic base of Los Angeles, simply because you have people from diverse cultures from around the world now residing there. It's an opportunity to expand our relationship, as we're doing now with the Sister Cities program, to take advantage of expatriate, say, Berliners living in Los Angeles, whose family lives in Berlin, Germany. And we know that they're going to visit Berlin, or Berliners are going to visit Los Angeles. So tourism has become a major tool for us in terms of focusing on what we do. It's a strong tool because generally, in most cases, it is the number one industry in most countries. In the United States, it's either the second or third industry. And artists are attractions for most people, be it static art such as the architecture, or it's the performance art. But literally, it is an attraction, and using that to our benefit, we've managed to create the kind of thing the African marketplace has become, which is not as stable as we would like it, but a very stable institution that's not depending on grants solely for its support.
how do we deal with the issue of art having to be significant enough in the marketplace to support itself? And in order for art to be relevant in the marketplace, is there the issue of having to dumb down the art so that it is interesting enough to a large enough number of people that some hapless sponsor will come along and offer his or her money to support it?
Well, unfortunately, the concept of watering down culture is a repulsive concept to me, but unfortunately, I think that we've allowed that to prevail. Our responsibility is to make sure that the pure, authentic story of a people gets told and remains on the table. So there are two pieces to this conversation that we're having. Art is in the eye of the beholder. Culture is in our spirit. You cannot change it. You cannot water it down. You can move me from Los Angeles, California to Berlin, but everything that's a part of my soul comes with me. It can't be watered down. And that's a responsibility that I have, is to make sure that the stories of the people in the community that I serve are supported enough, whether that's through a festival or through a classroom experience or through the publication of a book, that those stories remain authentic. And the point of this cultural exchange program is to bring those strong, authentic voices together to make sure that those stories stay strong. I think, on the other hand, the arts do mean business, and it is incumbent upon us as arts managers and producers to make sure that we create structures much like the African marketplace. And I'll let James talk about that can sustain themselves.
The whole idea of a corporation, hapless corporation, there are no hapless corporations. They do everything for purpose. You know, capitalism is their guiding light. You know, if they're going to sponsor an event, you can rest assured it's because they're getting a return.
Sure.
And it's all about investment and return. As we've attempted to do with the African marketplace, is place a value on the service that we provide. The idea that we're bringing diverse groups of people together and reaching a vast audience is important to those who practice capitalism for sake of survival or putting out new product. I think what we have not done as much, and what we want to do more of, is teach that arts community that the industry that they're in should be valued as an industry, and the economic impact of it should be valued. Most of what we're doing with the International Cultural Exchange Project rests with the number 2 industry in the world, again, tourism, and that people travel for culture. Rarely do they just travel to see a building, although when you say a facility, such as some of the facilities here in the museums here in Berlin, is part of the culture of Berlin. People will travel for culture. People will travel to participate or to view culture. Our objective is to make sure that we're teaching those policymakers that we value what we represent in these cities, these communities.
I had a recent conversation with Oscar Brown Jr. The BBC came over to the United States to do a documentary on Paul Robeson. I think it was on the 100th anniversary of his death. And they said that they were amazed at the fact that very few people knew who Paul Robeson was or is. What does that say when you talk about capitalism? How does that reflect upon an educational system that these kinds of values that you're talking about seem to be in contrast to the priorities that they seem to have established?
Well, I'd be curious to know who they were talking to, first of all. I'd want to get some clarity on that because, your audience can help skew the data. But I think to your point, music in American schools, of course the arts in American schools, have been marginalized, and the excuse has been budgetary practices. But the most creative and challenging students that we have are those young people that can come out with some of the most amazing solutions to complex problems. We seem to have forgotten that support for the arts must come from the very bottom rung of society. It has to come from people who value their children getting the fullest and most comprehensive education possible. We also seem to rely on elected officials and government officials to believe that the arts are important, so we don't talk about it or challenge that. Our voices have to be heard. So if we are going to participate in silence we can't expect more support for the arts.
And James, what have you done over the years to establish the African marketplace as a priority, not only in the Los Angeles community, but increasingly in the international community? What are the steps that you have taken, the means, what are the goals, and what are the means that you have taken to accomplish this feat?
Well, I think the most important thing is to make sure that our audience is diversified and that we're reaching a diversified group of performers representing all of the African diaspora. Consequently, you create those layers of people who depend on the existence of the African marketplace. And secondly, tying it into the tourism infrastructure of Los Angeles, making it a cultural destination, and not tying ourselves into the minimalist term community festival. Where communities sometimes tend to give less importance to a project, and then making sure that we were going to globalize it and talk to people all over the world and not just in that small community in Los Angeles.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to hear such optimistic points of view, and I must say we share them, and we look forward to your joining us here on the Collegium in the future. Hello, and welcome to our arts portion, arts calendar of the Collegium, where we're very pleased to speak with Mr. René Toriello. René, welcome to the Collegium.
Thanks. Good evening.
René, we've had the pleasure to work with you before, but now you're up to new ventures. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, around February, a friend of mine had the idea to start with a tango trio. In this case, a guitar trio. And this type of formation has been one of the earlier types that existed in tango. And it is having a renaissance in these times, around these times. A renaissance. It's starting to be again something that figures in Argentina.
What are the sources, the historical sources of tango music?
Well, that's quite a complex matter, and there are lots of influences from European music, African music, but it's mainly a European type of music. The instruments are European, of European origin, and it's something very local. It's something very much reflecting the spirit of the people, especially around Buenos Aires and the region of La Plata.
How significant in the music is the aspect of rhythm?
It is very, very important because it's a music you normally do dance to. So you have a steady beat, but there are lots of figurations, and it's very, sometimes quite tricky. Yeah.
What are your plans with your new venture for the future?
Well, we're in the process of recording at the moment, and we are trying to get as many engagements as possible, of course. Yeah, yeah. We want to extend our repertoire and to refine our arrangements as much as possible, and maybe we'll start working as well with additional people like dancers or singers. We'll see.
And the name of your group, and could you explain or define that term to us?
Yeah. Well, Polenta Arrabalera is a term that means something like the strength or the power of the neighborhood, you could say. Yeah.
Into the hood, huh? René, we look forward to hearing your music and you and the other fellows, okay? And welcome back to the Collegium. So stay with us, and remember, you are participating in the Collegium.